So what I'm going to be talking today about is MEF and MEF 3.0. Just giving you a quick update on what MEF is doing today. We've actually done a lot of change in the last few years to keep up with the changes in the market, and we've introduced a new paradigm that we call MEF 3.0, or a framework. So I'd like to talk about that. So the three main points that we are making with the work that we're doing is to drive the digital economy, to enable services that are cloud-like and assured, that are automated and operate across a global system. So that's really what the MEF is focused on today. And the drivers for this are two big drivers that we saw from a joint report that we did with Vertical Systems back in October of 2018. 100% of the service provider respondents said the top business driver for them is delivering services faster. It sounds pretty obvious, but that's what it's all about now, is getting those services out faster and faster and emulating what's going on in the cloud services, the cloud providers. But the issue that many of them face, and I'm pretty sure it's actually going to be more than 84% today, is the issue of orchestrating across multiple network providers and domains. How do you create end-to-end services that to the customer are completely agile, assured, automated, secure, even though you're operating across multiple domains? So that's what the MEF is focused on today. That is accelerating the worldwide adoption of assured services across multiple networks. Just going to, excuse me, is it possible to have this on the screen here as well? It's not there, no. Just get it, because otherwise I'm going to keep looking at the screen.
Oops. Let me see what I can do.
Okay, great. I'll keep going while we're waiting for that. So we've really focused on defining the services that service providers need to deliver and what they need to do to automate. So I'm going to take you through various aspects of how we're doing this, how we've organized MEF to achieve this, and how we've based it on the work that we've already done. So MEF, for those of you that don't know, it's an industry alliance with over 200 member companies. Over 60% are service providers. We've provided just a few of the logos of our members as examples. And you can see we have representation across the world from big, medium, and small service providers, as well as obviously leading technology providers. But it's all focused on services. Okay, it's not about the implementation from our point of view. It's not about the technology. It's about the services, defining services that service providers are going to offer. And the first point that we make is, well, actually, there are a whole range of services. Many of you are going to be familiar with the work that MEF has done over the years for carrier Ethernet, but now we're actually working on a whole slew of services that service providers provide. Optical transport services are being defined in MEF. IP services, SD-WAN services. We're now starting with security as a service, and there'll be more. So it's all about delivering these services, and we're very focused on the size of the market drivers, and addressing those needs in the market. So delivering those services, we need a framework in order to understand who the different stakeholders are in this ecosystem. And what we have here is a very typical picture that we use in order to describe the different elements of the work that we're doing. So we have obviously the service provider here on the left that's providing services to the customer. And obviously they're their footprint doesn't cover the entire world. They're going to be facing the cloud providers, but they're also going to be working with wholesale operators. So these services, we have the customer-facing side of it, we have the inter-carrier aspect, we have the cloud-facing aspect, we have the wholesale providers, we have the retail service provider itself, and the different sites. And what we've done is we've created this framework that is based on what we call Lifecycle Service Orchestration, LSO. And LSO here is per domain. So we have LSO for the service provider, and then we have LSO for each of the wholesale operators. I'm going to be talking more about the interface points, because the whole issue here is around not only abstracting out the services, but also defining the reference points between them. So what we've done in MEF is we've defined this lifecycle service orchestration in our reference architecture that we call MEF 55. It's a specification. And in MEF 55, we define reference points for the different interconnect points within this framework. What we've done is we've abstracted out the service below what we call LSO Presto, which is the infrastructure control and management area, which is underneath. So LSO Presto is that reference point there, and it is the reference point for orchestrating the different services, whether they be optical transport services, carrier Ethernet services, IP services, SD-WAN, and so on. We then have above that the service orchestration functionality. Now, obviously, service orchestration is a very generic term, general term. What we're referring to with service orchestration in the LSO context is the ability to not only orchestrate within the domain, but to orchestrate in a federated way with different providers to create an end-to-end service. So the model here is a federated model. It's not a hierarchical model. It's a federated model where each service provider, each operator, has its own environment, its own LSO environment, where it is interacting in an automated way with other operators, where one service provider effectively is creating an end-to-end service in collaboration with all the other operators. The customer will only see the service provider. The service provider will only see its neighbors in this federated model for the purposes of orchestration. So we have Presto here for orchestration of the infrastructure control management. And to think about it, if we're abstracting horizontally here. So at LSO Presto, if you're looking down within your domain, what you're seeing is resources, and you are seeing network as a service provider. Your orchestrator is seeing network and resources. And so the work that's done here at Presto will be around network resource provisioning, service OAM, service activation and testing. Whereas up here, above the service orchestration functionality, Legato, we have the business application. So when they look down the business applications in each domain, what they see there is the service within the domain. It might be the abstracted optical transport service. It might be the carrier Ethernet service and so on. Legato is for doing things like calling the catalog, calling the inventory within the domain. And then these are the north-south interfaces. And then we have the east-west between the carriers, Sonata and Interlude, and customer-facing Cantata and Allegro. I'm going to be talking about this in more detail in a future slide. So we're building on the work that we've done with carrier Ethernet. Many of you will be familiar with CE 2.0, We defined that through 2005 through to 2012. That's now an $80 billion market. But as I said before, we've moved from CE 2.0 to MEF 3.0. Now, this wheel that we see here with 4 quadrants really encapsulates the main elements of MEF 3.0. What we see here on the top left are services. When we define in MEF 3.0, our work is about defining services that the service providers are offering. And so actually we're starting to talk about product lines and products. We have in the services area, we have those optical transport, carrier Ethernet, IP, SD-WAN, SECaaS. And that work is well established. So that's about defining the services and our different standards. Now in this quadrant of work, we're talking about the interface points, those reference points at Legato and Presto, Sonata and so on, and the APIs that the service providers need in order to implement this paradigm. Those APIs are done in collaboration with other organizations, we'll see that, and they are open APIs that are defined by the industry. We have another quadrant, certification, which is about showing how service providers can comply with the standards, and then community, which is including other players in the ecosystem. So for services, we're talking about enabling assured services. For LSO APIs, it's about automation. It's about doing all those actions today that are manual, enabling them to be automated. For certification, we're talking about not one-off testing, but agile testing. And as the goalposts move, enabling the service providers to demonstrate how they're keeping up with the evolution of the market. And then community is about expanding this framework so that it works in collaboration with other partners in the ecosystem. Just very quickly here, I talked about the LSO reference points, and you'll see those mentioned, Cantata, Allegro, Sonata, Interlude, Legato, Presto. And these are the APIs that we're defining or have defined at each of these reference points. So you won't remember this off by heart, obviously, yet, but Sonata is our flagship reference point at the moment because that's the one between operators. That's the one where things like a service provider will do address validation with their operator partners, site validation, product quote, order, ticketing, billing, and so on. So that's Sonata. If you look at Legato, you're talking about service configuration and activation, service ordering, inventory, and catalog within the domain. And each of these characterizes what's going on at the different reference points. As I mentioned before, we actually have a very strong track record in certifying the ability to or the compliance with the standards that MEF's defined. We're known for carrier Ethernet certification. What we're doing now is we're introducing certification of MEF 3.0 services. Certification will be not just of static services, but the ability to deliver orchestrated services. So let's take an example of carrier Ethernet. That's an obvious one. Not only will our service providers able to certify that the carrier Ethernet service that they're delivering complies with the definitions of carrier Ethernet, they are also now able to certify that they can have those services orchestrated at one or more of the reference points using the APIs. So for example, one of our carrier Ethernet services is Access E-Line. It's a wholesale carrier Ethernet service definition. more and more service providers are offering Access E-line, but they also want to show their service provider customers that are ordering this wholesale access service from them that they can be orchestrated via LSO Sonata. And so the certification demonstrates that when commands are passed across LSO Sonata APIs, the Access E-line service will react, behave in the way that has been defined in MEF. We're also addressing the shortfall, emerging shortfall in skill sets. This is professional certification. This is an important part of the work of MEF, so I'm mentioning it here. We're seeing more and more of our service providers are having bigger and bigger challenges in finding the right people to design and deliver the services that we're defining at MEF. And so we've introduced professional certification not only for carrier Ethernet services, but also for SDN NFE, and also in our fundamental foundation certification, we're introducing LSO. So we're seeing more and more service providers and vendors actually getting their staff to train up and take these certifications. And we think this is a very important element in supporting the ecosystem of bringing these professional certifications to market. So the last quadrant in the MEF 3.0 framework is around the community, expanding beyond the work of MEF to bring in not just the work of our members, but also to bring in developers that want to work on MEF-related work, IT departments, not only from service providers, but generally from across the ecosystem. We also have a council of enterprises, large enterprises that provide their inputs and feedback on the work that's going on in MEF. We have a lot of MEF 3.0 proofs of concept. We're planning 20 this year that cover a range of work, including SD-WAN, blockchain, SD-WAN over satellite. The list goes on. So the MEF 3.0 proof of concepts are an important part of our community work. And then, and this is going to be discussed, I think, more at length during the course of this conference, active collaboration with open source projects and SDOs. So I'll take you through very quickly some examples, and my colleagues from 3GPP will be speaking, and TM Forum and Broadband Forum. So I'll cover this quickly, but you can see that we're collaborating with ONAP, OPNFE, and Open Daylight. In this context, it's about using what they're doing in terms of implementations as examples for implementation of the abstract definitions work that we're doing in MEF. Collaboration more on the interfaces, the reference points at ONAP. Open Daylight, there's a project that's actually implemented LSO Presto work. For TM Forum, we have a long-established collaboration with them on the work at LSO Sonata, using together the definitions that they've done at TM Forum of the APIs for things like pre-order and order, and we've applied them to the specific use cases that the MEF is working on for the different services. So that very, very productive and effective collaboration with TM Forum. ITU have adopted many of our standards and wrapped them in their recommendations, whether it's carrier Ethernet or information models. We also are liaising with Broadband Forum on IP service definitions that we're doing at MEF. And you can see there are other examples around APIs at TIP, and very extensive collaboration with ATIS on definitions of Ethernet ordering requirements and use cases and so on. Just to wrap up, I'll say that we have a big annual event. This year it's going to be MEF 19 in November in Los Angeles. And this is a really great opportunity to see all the work of MEF, whether it's in terms of the forward-looking vision thinking in the conference area, if it's the networking hall with the proof of concepts, and there's going to be a wide range, as I mentioned there. There's a lot of work going on in these events. It's a great opportunity to network and find out more about MEF and MEF 3.0. So I'll stop there and hand off to Dan. Thank you.